rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. I'm glad you could join me on this Wednesday. I want to talk a little bit about Columbus Day. I also want to talk about why I believe we should end Indigenous Peoples Day. So we'll get into that shortly here. But first, before I do, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to the podcast everywhere podcasts are found. You can go to thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com, Apple, Google, Spotify, you name it, I'm there. Also, follow me on social media, please. The Carl Jackson Show, wherever you find me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. And again, please, listen, I know you want a good night's rest. I know that this left-wing party, these radicals that are in office are completely stressing you out, messing up your sleep, and you're worried about American manufacturing, American jobs, because let's face it, under this regime, the economy is hurting a little bit, but you need to treat yourself. Treat yourself to a good night's sleep, some rest, and you can support American jobs and American manufacturing, and God knows we're going to need it. You can do that by going to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, and use the promo code Carl. You can take advantage of these nice Giza Dream Sheets, also the Percale bed sheets for as low as $29.98. There's a variety of colors and sizes. All you have to do, mypillow.com, click on mypillow.com. Again, click on that radio listener square, use the promo code Carl, or give them a call at 1-800-858-0263. There's also a towel set available for only $19.98. Three-piece towel set normally sells for $49.98. I'm telling you, you will love their towels. So support election integrity, support American jobs, American manufacturing, support this podcast. Please go to mypillow.com, click on that radio listener square, Carl, or give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. Okay, it's time to end Indigenous Peoples Day. I want to say that. I have no shame in my game in saying that. I'm so tired of the woke left trying to totally distort history and put us in this age of what's now called presentism, where we judge the sins of the past by today's standards. It's absolutely asinine. It's absolutely juvenile. But this is exactly what the left does. But if we're going to use their standards, then perhaps the person that shouldn't be canceled or the people that shouldn't be canceled isn't Christopher Columbus and Europeans, right, that discovered the Western Hemisphere. Perhaps it should be the indigenous peoples themselves. So before you get all riled up, let me get into this. Also, quickly, I'm going to talk about should the West seek an off-ramp in Ukraine? I believe the answer is yes at this point. I'm sorry. It's time to find a truce, bring this puppy to a close as soon as we possibly can. I'll get into that shortly. I do want to start, obviously, with what I said I was going to start with, and that is ending Indigenous Peoples Day. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus, why I believe the left hates him. First off, he was born in 1451. He was the father of I think his father was a wool weaver. You know, it was a caste system, class society or whatever. This was a kid who was more than likely going to be a wool weaver himself, but he didn't want to do that. God had a mission for him. God had another call for him. This guy was highly curious. This guy was a rugged individual. Oh my God, does the left hate that term? So he was a rugged individual. This was a guy that was extremely curious about the seas, loved the seas, right? He had this, whatever it was, this an intuition that there was land in the Western Hemisphere, and he was hungry. He wanted to check it out. He wanted to explore. These are the type of Elon Musk type people, right? That we love, where God gives them this gift and they're just hungry and they desire, to do something great, and they create something great. That's who Christopher Columbus was. And the left wants to tear him down because he was successful, because he was a rugged individual. And honestly, just on a practical basis, they want to destroy Western history. They want to revise it like the Howard Zinn, using Howard Zinn's books and all this kind of stuff on college campuses to brainwash these college kids so that they can basically replace history, totally revise it. They want globalism. We'll get into that shortly. But this guy, Christopher Columbus, went to the King of Portugal. He wanted some money for his traveling expenses, if you will. It was going to be very costly. He couldn't afford it on his own. He was turned down. And then he went to the King and Queen of Spain. They turned him down initially. Only after an 8-year period of time, they went ahead and financed the trip for Christopher Columbus and his crew. You guys may have remembered, or you heard of the ships, the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, and the Spaniards financed this trip. He set sail. 10 weeks on sea. They come to San Salvador, currently known as the Bahamas. They meet the I think it's Taína tribe. Taína tribe, and everything was copacetic. It was amazing that that was a godsend that this person that he came in contact with initially could actually, speak his language and understand his language. Absolutely a phenomenal story, an absolute God story, in my opinion. And Christopher Columbus, listen, he was a human. He had frailties, idiosyncrasies, both good and bad, like the rest of us do. But he told his crewmen he didn't want these people to be taken advantage of. These people would try to trade some of their resources for just beads and cheap stuff like that. He told his crew not to do that, to make sure the trades were fair. He was trying to look out for him, but he was a complicated man. Now, there was no mass genocide, as the left would have you believe. As a matter of fact, most of the genocide occurred after Christopher Columbus was dead and gone. Just unbelievable. There's no doubt that because of, things that we know today, there's that presentism. I have no doubt that there were some diseases and all that kind of stuff. Just look at what we went through with the pandemic that caused some chaos, that caused some death, right? But there was no mass genocide. Christopher Columbus didn't discover the Western Hemisphere and just start killing people like crazy. Because, guys, you have to understand that the people that he was coming in contact with were absolute barbarians. Now, not necessarily the Taína tribe, but he ran into the Caribs. There was a tribe of cannibals, and they loved eating babies. They loved eating their babies. Their babies were a delicacy. They loved eating their babies. Absolutely disgusting. But thanks to this left-wing woke political intervention that we have today, now the left wants they want to forget Christopher Columbus. They want to say, man, he just killed Native Americans. This is how we discovered the Western Hemisphere. It's just absolutely insane. They want to totally discredit him. Now, he did sell some native slaves. I suspect that if he sold native slaves, it's because the tribes were warring as they were, and these were the slaves that they offered. And Christopher Columbus sold them. Is that wrong? Absolutely. Would you have done it? Were you in Christopher Columbus's day? Yes, because slavery was universal. So get off your high horse. Now, also, the Spaniards ended up hooking up with the Native American people at the time, and that's why you have Hispanics, or today's Latinos. So that's some of what happened there. But today, now, we have the left wanting this Indigenous Peoples Day to occur on the second Monday in October, and it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. I'm sorry. Christopher Columbus Day should be celebrated. The Western Hemisphere has brought such innovation, creation, you name it, to the world. It's been a total benefit of the world. Had Christopher Columbus not done that, I suspect someone eventually would have. Who knows? But had he not done that, you just don't know where we would be today. The truth is, left-wingers, they hate everything that's tied to Western civilization. They hate people of European descent. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And now what they want to do is rebrand Christopher Columbus Day. We shouldn't stand for it. If you're on the right, you shouldn't stand for it. If you're a person, if you just happen to be a patriot and you're tired of the wokeism of the left, you should absolutely not stand for it. And by the way, if we're going to judge or if we're going to have Indigenous Peoples Day and not have Christopher Columbus Day, and we're judging Christopher Columbus by a standard of barbarianism and slavery, murder, conquest, all this kind of stuff, well, then perhaps it's the Native Americans themselves, the indigenous people themselves, that should not have a holiday. If that's the standards, or if slavery, if murder and conquest is the standard of which we're saying Christopher Columbus shouldn't have a day. And by the way, again, no genocide on Christopher Columbus's part. But if you're saying that this is the standard, then there should be no Indigenous Peoples Day. Hat tip to a website called Restoring America. Given their history of slavery and conquest, we should end Indigenous Peoples Day. And I totally agree. I totally agree with this. So years of leftist indoctrination have taught us that any civilization that attacked, enslaved, or conquered people who were not of European descent, as indigenous tribes did for centuries, is not worth honoring or celebrating. So if that's the case, then we should not celebrate indigenous people, because they warred against each other big time. So long before Columbus even set foot on the Western Hemisphere in 1492, Native Americans roamed the land. They thirsted for more land and resources, because what are you going to do? You travel around the Western Hemisphere. These people don't have technology like we have today. That's the problem with presentism. So they had to go to lands where they could farm and breed animals and all this kind of stuff, and be comfortable as they could in their time and day. And they would have to walk around the Western Hemisphere and land and try to find places where it was conducive for a living environment for them. And so what would happen is they would end up conquering other tribes and taking their land. That's just the way it was. That's just the way it was. A moronic statement from the White House, and we know this is nothing unusual when it comes to the White House. They said this. They announced, or they proclaimed, that, quote, indigenous peoples were forcibly removed from ancestral lands. They were displaced, assimilated, and banned from worshiping or performing many sacred ceremonies. So in other words, you should hate yourself, Americans. We should hate ourselves, Westerners. But despite the overwhelming desires for leftists to blame the white man, again, it was actually Native Americans who committed these crimes against one another. So what does the left want to do? What are they up to? Well, they're globalists. Remember that. It's a term that I didn't even like using just a couple of years ago, but it's so true. We all know of the World Economic Forum. We've all heard of the Great Reset. So what the left wants to do, if they could destroy our history, if they can make us look bad and brainwash this next generation upcoming, or the next couple of generations upcoming, revise history, these youngins will embrace globalism. They will totally dismiss or disdain American heritage, and the globalists will have their way, including those that exist in the White House right now. So they want to totally abolish our history, totally revise our history. That's what Howard Zinn did. His book should be marked fictional. Shouldn't be. I mean, they should be marked fictional. The guy just hated America. The guy hated Western culture, but he thrived in it. Freaking hypocrite. Anyway, there's consider this guy, this Harvard scholar, Steven Pinker. He's done extensive research on this subject. He revealed that Native American cultures were, quote, far more violent than our own, close quote. He also categorized indigenous society as, quote, the most violent era, close quote, in the continent's history, after an archaeologist by the name of Tim Kohler discovered the brutality of the Mesa Verde and the Pueblo Indians. So Kohler's research showed this. Listen to these numbers. 90% of human remains from that period had trauma from blows either to their heads or parts of their arms. Let me say that again. 90% of human remains from that period, speaking of Native Americans, indigenous peoples, from that period had trauma from blows either to their heads or to their arms. These people warred with each other all the time. Now, it isn't my goal to sit here and denigrate Native Americans. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what I'm trying to tell you and what I'm trying to explain is not only that slavery was universal, but so was conquest. That was the way of the world. That's what makes America exceptional. That's what makes Britain, in the end, with William Wilberforce, even exceptional, and the Western Hemisphere, because it was the Western Hemisphere that did away with slavery. I mean, you still have slavery in the East. I mean, I don't care where you go. Iran, China, places across the Middle East. I mean, it's insane. Slavery still exists, and these people will not talk about this. There's an anthropologist by the name of Lawrence Kelly. He chronicled Native American societies and civilizations. He has a book called War Before Civilization: The Myth of the Peaceful Savage. And what Keeley proclaimed is that, quote, the dogs of war were seldom on a leash, close quote. And he regarded Native American tribal interaction. He's also famous historian Bernard Bailyn classified indigenous society before interaction with Europeans as, quote, not a terribly peaceful world. They were always involved in warfare. They were always looking to conquer each other. And then don't forget the Aztecs. For decades, the Aztecs conquered neighboring tribes to form their own large empire. All right. And now that's what's known as Central Mexico. But they raped women. They enslaved children. They participated in human sacrifice, capital punishment. They punished homosexuality with death. So if you were homosexual and the Aztecs knew about it, bye-bye, you were gone. They regularly exploited women and regularly murdered women. The Aztecs did. All right. So are these the people that we want to celebrate? Listen, I think it's really important that I'm so sick of all of these. Black History Month, bye-bye. Indigenous Peoples Day, bye-bye. Hispanic Heritage Month, bye-bye. Before they come up with Asian. I mean, good Lord, we are a great melting pot in the United States of America. I'm sick and tired of all of these holidays that are actually meant, or months that we celebrate, that are actually meant to divide us. Black American history is American history. Hispanic Heritage Month, listen, there's Hispanics that have contributed greatly to the success of America. You know what we need to do? We need to put the stories that inspire people, and even the bad stories that don't, inside of our history books. Real stories, with real accounts of things or events that occurred, the good and the bad. Read them all, but understand that we are an exceptional nation because we have a constitution and we have a rule of law that brings us together, or at least it used to. It's unbelievable. Indigenous savagery existed for centuries, even after the Europeans arrived. You heard me talk about this earlier. The savagery, much of it existed after several hundred years after Christopher Columbus. Consider the Chippewa. This tribe conquered their Sioux neighbors. They forced them into exile from what is present-day Minnesota. In turn, the Sioux attacked and massacred the Pawnee, the Kiowa, and the Omaha. Numerous other tribes also attacked and the white man had nothing to do with it. There wasn't a clash of civilizations. There was a clash within civilizations of Native Americans. This is the truth. This is the truth. There should be no Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm so tired of the left trying to distort the history in order to divide and conquer us as Americans, because they want to rule over all of us. And they figure if they can divide us into groups, if they can keep us mad and angry, then they can control us. They'll use our fear. They'll use our emotions. And what they'll do is they'll bring up policies that'll have us run into their arms. And that's exactly what they want to do. So the solution to that, and Indigenous Peoples Day. The only holidays we should be celebrating, in my opinion, in America is, Christmas and Hanukkah, the 4th of July, Thanksgiving. Did I say Independence Day? If I didn't, Independence Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day. I'm sorry. We should celebrate the things that bring us together. And for those of you that are thinking, well, what about the other religions? Well, if you want your own holiday, go discover your own land and go discover your own land. America is exceptional because of our Judeo-Christian heritage. I mean, it just simply is because of our Constitution. It's freaking amazing. All right, real quick. Let me get on to this. Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire had an excellent article, thought-provoking. And he asked the question, should the West seek an off-ramp in Ukraine? The answer is hell yes. It is time. I'm sorry. We are spending so much money in Ukraine when we're in debt. It is getting sickening. I do believe I'm one of these people that believe that Ukraine should have been a buffer between our NATO allies and Russia. Biden screwed that up big time. What he should have done is kept his big mouth quiet, instead of keeping his corn pop attitude and spouting off at the mouth, talking about Armageddon and all this kind of nonsense. And he could have armed Ukraine on the DL, and he could have forced the arm of NATO to step up when Putin was gathering his troops around the Ukrainian border. I mean, there was plenty of time. I remember at the time, so many conservatives saying, I don't think Putin will do it. I don't think he'll invade I don't think he'll invade Ukraine. And I sat there thinking, why wouldn't he? Trump isn't in office. This is a guy, if you read some of his college papers, this was a guy that was obsessed with making sure that Russia became the Russia that it used to be, or the Soviet Union, the USSR that it used to be. He didn't even go to Gorbachev's funeral. So a lot of people thought, this guy would fold if we keep the pressure on him, or the supposition now, as Ben Shapiro writes, by our thought leaders, seems to be that if we keep up the pressure on Vladimir Putin in Ukraine, he'll fold and go home. He says his threats to use tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield are nothing more than saber rattling, or at least that's what our leaders think. But that's just not the case. That's not the case. They thought that he will then retrench on the domestic front, re-solidify his power, and continue throwing his prospective enemies over balconies, third-story windows, as Ben Shapiro puts it. But that hasn't been the case. And again, a lot of people thought that, he wouldn't invade Ukraine. I sat there the whole time. I even mentioned on radio, I was just like, why wouldn't he? That was my question. Just why wouldn't he? I can't think like an evil dictator, but if I'm trying to, and I want to reestablish the Soviet Union, the old Soviet Union, what better time to do it when you have a weak, senile old man in the White House? It made total sense to me. So if Joe Biden gets his wish, if Putin is indeed ousted, we have to ask the question, and Ben Shapiro asked this, what will follow? This is something we have to think about, because there's no plan in place. Who would run Russia? We have no freaking clue. I mean, and guys, I hate Vladimir Putin. I think he's an evil dictator, and I think he's going straight to hell unless he were to repent. And I don't see the guy repenting. But I think he's going straight to hell with gasoline draws on. But you have to ask the question pragmatically, who's going to overtake Russia? Who's going to take over? Is it going to be someone worse than him? Is it going to be somebody that steps in and I don't know. And all of this could have been avoided, because if we stop and think about it, this is an energy war. This is an energy war. If Biden wouldn't have closed the Keystone pipeline and wage war against our oil companies, this probably would have never happened. Putin got an opportunity and he seized on it. But having said that, what is he going to do? There's no, according to Ben Shapiro, he says the Russian Republic remains highly supportive of aggressive foreign action to expand the empire. That seems a little, when you have Russians trying their best to avoid, I think there's some argument there. In other words, when you have Russians trying their best to avoid the draft, if you will, in Russia, I don't know. But anyway, he goes on to say the Russian public remains highly supportive of the aggressive foreign action to expand the empire. Other than the military, there are no well-organized or powerful groups in Russia. And Putin does have an inner circle of possible successors who are probably anything more anti-West than Putin himself. Excuse me. So these are things that we seriously have to consider. And keep in mind, that's a nation that's armed, albeit with aging nuclear power, nuclear weapons. They have a serious nuclear arsenal. And now, for those of you who have said he wouldn't invade Ukraine, he won't use nuclear weapons. Yeah, I think he would. Now, maybe it wouldn't be massive nuclear weapons. I don't know. You don't know. We don't know. So the best thing to do is we have to try to give this guy an off-ramp. I remember talking about this with James Carafano of the Heritage Foundation months and months ago. We got to give this guy an off-ramp. I don't like it. I understand Ukraine doesn't like it, but we got to give him an off-ramp. This stuff has got to stop. More people are going to die unnecessarily so, or we're going to end up in World War III because we have Biden in the White House. And you have to consider what the left does. The left sucks at foreign policy. They're weak at foreign policy. They love making money, I believe, off of these deals, but they also use foreign policy instead of to advance America's best interest. They use foreign policy, the Democrats do, the left do, to advance their own domestic political agendas. In other words, they want to look good leading up to the midterm election. And this moron in the White House is willing to go to war in order to look good. That's a scary thought. That's a scary thought. Ben Shapiro writes something that I thought is brilliant. And he says here, in November 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland, attempting to install a puppet communist government. The West united in opposition to Soviet intervention, shipping weaponry to the Finns, who bravely stood against the forces of Stalin. The USSR lost at least 126,000 soldiers over the course of the 3.5-month war, but responded in the late going with a massive infusion of troops and a heavy offensive that drove the Finns back on their heels. You don't think that's what Putin wants to do today? Faced with the prospect of open war with the Western powers, Stalin signed the Moscow Peace Treaty in March 1940, with the Finns ceding 9% of the territory in Stalin. It may just be Zelensky has been brave. I give him props. I know a lot of people can't stand him. He's, taking silly pictures for magazines that he shouldn't have. And I don't know. He wasn't a great president before this. He seemed to be a good wartime president. He's strong in propaganda. They all are over there. But I got to tell you, I don't blame him as well. And I know this is going to sound crazy. I don't blame Putin for taking advantage of a weak United States of America under Biden's leadership. It's wrong. It's evil. Don't get me wrong. It's wrong. It's evil. I want Putin dead. Biden screwed up. Democrats screwed up by voting for Biden. So we have to ask ourselves, what's the easiest way to end this thing before everything gets worse? We got to give Putin an off-ramp. We've got to give Putin an off ramp. I'm sorry, it just has to happen. We've got to create our own Moscow peace treaty, and NATO isn't stepping up to the plate like they should. More lives are going to end, and things are going to get even worse. It's going to not only will more people, I think, die in war and starve to death as a result of this war. But you're talking about massive economies that just tank. It's going to get really bad. So wherever we can stop the bleeding, we have to stop the bleeding. So we need a truce in this war. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, please subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, to my Rumble channel. I would very much so appreciate that. I thank you guys for tuning in. Also, follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. Don't forget our friends. Don't forget my friend Mike Lindell at mypillow.com. Use the promo code Carl. Again, take advantage of those Giza Dream Sheets, the Percale bed sheets. They will make great Christmas presents coming up. You can buy early. The price is as low as $29.98. And you're probably going to want to buy more thoughtful gifts coming up. Gifts like that you can find on MyPillow. The towel sets as well. You're going to want to get things that last. These items come with a 10-year warranty, a 60-day money-back guarantee. You can't beat that with a bat. You can also give them a call at 1-800-858-0263 or mypillow.com. Click on that radio listener square. Use the promo code Carl. Until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you. And let's end Indigenous Peoples.